So as I walked into the great hall the other day, down out of the Christie House courtyard, I looked up and I saw the Epiphany coat of arms embossed over the door in cement. And I know you don't need me to explain what's on that cross, but I will anyway, just for the sake of folks online that are watching us. So at the top is a crown, and then underneath are some waves, and then under that, sort of holding the crest, at least that's how I see it, is an anchor. And the anchor is an ancient Christian symbol of hope. And so as I passed under that crest and over the threshold, I stepped into a space that I pray is a home of hope. A place where that anchor is set, buried, deep, secure, grounded in the promises of God. This is our home of hope, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. The world needs what we offer. Jesus resurrected is the God of hope. Now, last Sunday, you may recall Kelly Martin preached a super sermon about didn't she? About Thomas and Jesus. And Jesus' wounds and the vulnerability that those wounds reveal, where Jesus invites Thomas to put his hand in the wound, right? And to touch the holes in his hands. Though once broken and victimized and hung on the cross, hope prevailed. In the resurrection, in the upper room where Jesus rejoined the disciples for a meal. The resurrection of Jesus is the hope to which we are anchored. And Kelly's sermon gave me cause to consider the other place where we meet Jesus and Thomas in conversation. It's in the 14th chapter of the Gospel of John, another meal, it turns out, that turns into the Last Supper. And Jesus is talking to his disciples. He's sort of setting things up for them. And he says, and I quote, "Do not let your hearts be troubled." Jesus says, "Trust in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again, and I will take you to myself, so that where you are, I will be also." Thomas says, "Lord, I do not know where you're going. How can I know the way?" To which Jesus replies, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." And those are words he lays out as hope. Now, I understand that those words can be complicated to hear, right? A claim often is put towards an exclusivity for Christianity around Jesus and God. But I want you to resist the temptation of hearing it that way. Instead, I want you to remember, or set as a higher priority, that this conversation sits at the center of the Gospel of John. And we know the essence of John, right? The missional direction of John, the witness of John is outlined right at the beginning of the Gospel of John. Remember that line? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and all things came into being through him. And without him, not one thing came into being, and what came into being was life. Right? And the life was the light for all people. That is an important point to remember right at the beginning, all people. Resurrection is a word of hope for all creation. Belief not being the criteria for that reality. And the world needs a lot of hope right now. Am I right? Yeah, right. Short supplies. Statistics tell us, the CDC just put out a report recently that said 44% of American teens and adults are experiencing persistent feelings of hopelessness. That's a big number. So I wondered why. Psychology Today says this about the persistent cause of hopelessness in this country. It's multifaceted. So for adults, it seems climate change and its potential catastrophic effects are big. Angst around nuclear proliferation, complicated by world conflicts, complicated by extreme nationalism. The pandemic, of course, and the fear of another. What that meant, the PTSD as a result of the pandemic. And then on top of all that, the uncontrolled advancement of digital technology and what that means for jobs, what that means for privacy, what that means for communication, what that means for relationships, and all of that, of course, is exacerbated by generative artificial intelligence. Right? That's a lot. That's a short list. And you take all of that and you roll it up, right? And then you hand it on to young people and you put it onto their hearts, our teens and young adults. And suddenly identity and purpose worm its way into the equation as well, overwhelming them with questions about who am I? What is my place in this world? What is this world going to look like? And does anyone care about that? And then you take that sentiment and you put it on a screen that you can flick your thumb across to experience one heartbreak after another heartbreak after another heartbreak, and you can feel pretty alone and besieged. Like, his hopelessness breeds isolation, and that is an epidemic, 44%. And I'm afraid many have forgotten, or maybe have been overcome by amnesia, to the fact that just around the corner, there sits a home of hope. It's waiting. It's waiting for them, anyone. And we are anchored, you and I, to this dwelling place of hope, built by the hands of the carpenter, Jesus, the author of life, as we heard Scott read about today. The word that came into the world, a light to drive out the darkness. Now, hope is being able to see light despite all the darkness. That's a quote from Desmond Tutu during the darkest, bleakest days of apartheid. Do not let your hearts be troubled, Jesus says. Trust in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. This is one of them, where we sit this morning. And here there's a tether dangling at Epiphany that we can grab onto, a tether that we can pull, right? And as we pull, it pulls us as a place like a boat on a lake towards the future. And it's a future we can't see, but we get a sense of through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. A future that remedies the wounds without erasing the memories. For, as it says in the book of Hebrews, who hopes for what can be seen? Look around. Who hopes for what can be seen? We do not hope for what we can see. We hope for what we cannot see. In the upper room, Jesus says to Thomas, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen, and yet who come to believe. Okay? That's hard, huh? So what's it mean for us? That's the question. What's it mean for us? What does it mean to be a people of hope? Well, one of the things it means is to be unreconciled to the suffering that we see right now in the world in front of us. You see, hope is a force that keeps us unreconciled to the misery of the present age. Hope, it turns out, is catalytic, right? Hope is the power, the fuel that moves the muscles motivated to pull that tether hand over hand toward a future that is better than things are right now. And when we pull hand over hand, we drag the world away from the things that drags it down. Fear and isolation, division, waste, degradation, selfishness, towards a place where hope dwells. The Garden of Eden, to use a metaphor. right, towards the world as God designed it to be. So as we crest the threshold of this church, as we walk under that anchor and into this place, we arrive at a place that's dissatisfied with the present, right here, and completely confident in the future, both at the same time. Dissatisfied with the world as it is and completely confident in the future. Resurrection is God's assurance of that, right? The foretaste of that all will be well. Hope's anchored in God's promise of ultimate restoration. That is what the resurrection gives us a foretaste of. It is the promise articulated, made known to us by God present, that ultimate restoration will happen, even in the midst of our present woundedness. And Thomas punctuates this when he gets it. Remember what he says? When he gets it, he turns to Jesus and he says, "My Lord and my God." Gives it all up right there. My Lord and my God. And his proclamation is our proclamation. It's a refrain. It's a refrain that I hope echoes throughout this place. But I'm afraid sometimes it hasn't, or it hasn't been well heard, and for that I apologize personally, particularly to young people in our midst, right? Because sometimes we unwittingly obfuscate the message, it seems. Probably because we use words like obfuscate. And for that I apologize. That's on me. I'll take that. That's on me. I had to look that up before I used it. It's an SAT word, I think. When they used to take SATs. Anyway, for that, I apologize. It's important that we try again, right? That we work on this. It's important to say to all people, young people in particular, that we're glad you're here, we're glad you're watching, we're glad you're in our presence, we care about you deeply. And if you feel a sense of hopelessness in the world that we're leaving behind to you, for that we apologize as well. And if you've given up on us, I don't blame you. If you've given up on your teachers or politicians or business leaders or innovators or pastors, I can understand why. But do not give up on God. Right? Don't do that. Don't give up on the resurrected Jesus, my Lord and my God. Because he's made a dwelling place for us, each one of you. And that's anchored. Right, that's anchored in the world as God knows it can be, that we are drawn toward. And dangling on the other end of that anchor is that tether that we can grab onto. Right, we can grab onto it right here. That's what we do. We do it together. It's a source of salvation in the way that we ultimately move towards the restoration of all things as God laid it out to be. And we know what it'll look like. We know what it can look like. And that said, we can't do it individually. Certainly, we can't do it collectively either. We don't have the capacity to actively create ultimate and perfect restoration of all things, but through God. We do. With God, we do. In God, we do. By God, we do. That's the promise of the resurrection. Restoration, alive and achieved. And that's why we exist. Us here, church. That's why we exist. And that matters. I hope it matters to us, but it certainly matters to our children and our grandchildren, right? That there's a place of restoration, that there's a home of hope, where it's God's way that we proclaim, and not failed policies of governments or economic powers, but what God promises through the resurrection of Jesus, magnified by the wounds we put upon him. Hope doesn't circumvent hardship. Hope doesn't circumvent hardship, it transforms it. It transcends it. Hope is active. Hope is the force that shapes present actions into future possibilities. Can I say that again? Hope is the present action that turns into future possibility. Hope is catalytic. Hope is being able to see light despite all the darkness. And hope has a home here at Epiphany, our dwelling place, right? Where we hold on to the tether anchored into the future that God is drawing us into. And so my invitation is when you cross this threshold here, that you're taking one step closer to the future that God promises. Right? To the world restored to balance and equanimity. We believe that. A place where all souls are honored because all souls, every one of them, made and loved by God. The world needs places of hope desperately. There are too many people that don't know that just around the corner from them is a home of hope.